Synozur, this is Polaris. I'm Chris McNulty. Last month, we spent time exploring the digital workplace for 2025. Today, we'll take a deeper dive into how AI is transforming digital workplaces and how digital workplaces, in turn, are integrating the patchwork of AI systems that are proliferating across the world. This is Polaris. Welcome to Polaris Pathways. I'm your host, Chris McNulty, Head of Strategic Markets at Synozur. Synozur is an advisory agency focused on transforming business for our clients, navigating strategies and leadership culture with ease. Today, we'll be speaking again with Ed Rogers from Akumina and Michelle Caldwell from Synozur. When I first interviewed Ed and Michelle for our podcast on digital workplaces back in February, we had a rich discussion about the interplay between AI and digital workplaces. AI is transforming technology everywhere, including the ways we generate and interact with content and communications in digital workplaces. Likewise, digital workplaces have long had an important role in integrating and centralizing access to a broad range of applications. As we've spoken about previously, the demand for omni-AI is fueled by the proliferation of chatbots showing up in dozens of mission-critical applications over the past several years. Anyway, we had such a rich discussion, I decided to spin off our dialogue about AI and digital workplaces into a special edition of Polaris. We call these episodes Polaris Pulse because they're shorter, deeper dives into a single topic of interest. And also, I hate long podcasts. I found one last week. The broadcaster shall remain anonymous. They began with 3 minutes of commercials and proceeded to an 85-minute discussion about meditation and sports. That's part of the reason we split this into 2 episodes. But next, let's define our terms and look at our data points. Digital workplaces are virtual work environments that integrate technology, people, and business processes to facilitate communication, collaboration, and productivity, allowing staff to work from anywhere with an internet connection. AI continues to grow. Synozur research is projecting the market for generative AI is growing at triple-digit rates and will reach significantly over $100 billion this year. But that expansion of revenues is also leading to an expansion of interfaces. The other trend in the background for today's discussion is the proliferation of AI tools and techniques. This is driving the demand for something we've spoken about previously, omni-AI. In Synozur research, based in part on data from the Harvard Business Review, we see the productivity drain from knowledge worker task switching will reach close to $280 billion this year. In part, this is being fueled by the proliferation of separate AI systems that require people to move amongst multiple AI applications to get their job done. We know that task switching and all of that content shifting is a tremendous drain on productivity, and it will be fascinating to watch how other technologies respond to the demands brought by AI. I thought it would be a great time to dig more deeply into what's happening with AI and digital workplaces. So we're about to pick up on my interview with Ed and Michelle. Ed Rogers, CEO and co-founder of Akumina, has a rich history helping business leaders change the way they work. Akumina is a leading employee experience platform that empowers organizations to create personalized and engaging digital workplaces. Before founding Akumina, Ed was the COO of Ektron, a leader in web content management. He's coming from New Hampshire and is, of course, a huge hockey fan. Michelle Caldwell is CEO of Synozur, and she's a leader in organizational transformation with over 25 years of experience leading global consulting firms. She works with Microsoft and other partners from her home base in the Pacific Northwest. So we've got them ready. Let's go. Okay, there's a pendulum swing between things becoming integrated and then things getting disintegrated. We've had office suites, and then they came together, and then we had a proliferation of portals, and then we integrated them together. And now, when we think about things like AI, there's lots of places where there's a chatbot getting my attention all over the place. So is that just going to be the norm going forward? Or should we be thinking about digital workplaces as having like a key role at minimizing all of the productivity losses from content switching?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is a sea change for sure, Chris. I think how we interact with software is going to change over the next several years, and how we interact with machinery. How it's going to change, though, I think that's up for grabs. But I think the way you want to approach AI, first, you embrace it, because the right AI agent basically means that every employee becomes a manager, right? To have their own little assistant running on that. When you start working, have a conversational experience with the agent on a document, that's such a natural, frictionless experience. You naturally want to keep going in that direction. And so when you saw some of these big projects where things were integrated and you had to go here, had to go there, eventually that friction that was there would prevent the adoption to fail. So using AI, creating a frictionless experience with the information and the communication that you want to have with your employees is going to be what carries the day in the long run.
So, Michelle, I want to bring you in on this. When you think about what frictionless access to multiple apps should be, what does that look like in a digital workplace in 2025?
What I'm observing, and I agree with that AI is a sea change in the enterprise. However, there's every app everywhere. Everyone has, let's call it an agent or agentic capability. And there is a real lack of an integrated strategy about what this should look like. What should we be using? Yeah, it's great to experiment and understand. And there's pilots upon pilots and everyone's using everything everywhere all at once. And what we're getting back to is, unfortunately, a friction-filled experience where what agent am I supposed to be using for what, where, and on what platform? There's a lack of a vision here in many organizations to bring this together and really think about what is the right experience? What are the handshakes, if you will, between these agentic capabilities, agent-based, chatbot, you want to call it, right? Used to be chatbots, now it's called agents, right? And the other challenge here is many organizations, those different platforms, let's say ServiceNow, that's generally sponsored and owned by IT. And then you have ERP systems, generally sponsored by like operations. You've got things like Workday, generally sponsored by HR. You have these communication and digital workplace platforms like Akumina. Mark Holmes has become a really like big proponent and sponsor of that. These sponsors don't strategize together. And so we end up with, we're coming back to this place where we have a very disjointed experience being released in the age of AI because all these platforms are competing to keep up with this sea change of AI. So oftentimes what I end up doing, because I'm a neutral party, I come from an outside perspective and can often bring these leaders into a room together and say, okay, let's talk about it together, because I don't have, let's say, a horse in the race or a favorite application that I've put my executive badge on the table, if you will, for, and I've spent a lot of money to try to help the organization have a better experience for the employees. It's just getting the leaders to get in a room together, if you will, and actually think through what is the organization as a whole trying to achieve and how can all of these platforms work together seamlessly. It's not happening. So when you ask me what I'm seeing the opposite emerging back into the, corporate landscape.
So it's the stakeholders fractioning off as much as the applications being fractionated.
Unfortunately, right? Just because, again, when you're the owner of, let's say, or the sponsor of that app, you're probably not checking in with the other 5 leaders with their apps at an enterprise scale and really thinking about, okay, if I'm the employee out in the field and I have to use all these things, like it's not helpful to present me with too many options, right?
Yep. Yeah. So you both hinted at it, and I think it's impossible in 2025 for me to host a podcast episode where I never say the letters A and I next to each other, but that's where we are. AI has tremendous potential to transform and accelerate productivity and business process. We're agreed on that, right? So let me toss out something more controversial, and I'd love to hear your reaction to it. The ability of a chat-based interface that sits across all these other application areas to pull information from across these silos is such that is so powerful and so compelling that I don't need to bring people to a digital workplace anymore. Everything that they need is going to be supplied by chat.
So under those conditions, Kristen, how do you deliver your brand? And how do you control your culture? And I think that's where the concern is. What Michelle referring to right now, we're in an arms race that I've never seen before. The speed in which this arms race is running, I've never seen it. And I've seen the emergence of the cloud, the emergence of mobile, right? Mm-hmm. But people do need to think out what their strategy is. It's not just how to get AI out there. It's not just to increase productivity, but it's to how do we properly engage and keep the culture going as well, right? And that's going to be some of the challenges. One of the things I said earlier is I think AI is going to affect everything. How? We don't know yet.
Right.
That's I think the biggest thing. I think any company who's going forward with thinking that they don't have to focus on AI, that's a mistake. Anybody who simply grabs the new shiny toy, that's also a mistake, right? But I think going forward, there's so much flexibility in what you can do with AI. How it emerges is I think is going to be in ways that people didn't anticipate.
Michelle, would you agree with that? Do you think that we're never going to be able to do everything through chat?
Yeah, I don't think we can deliver a human-centric, empathetic approach with chat alone. I mean, I go back to when I'm on a site in a consumer-based experience, and some of the companies, I won't say their names, but they invest a lot in those experiences, and I'd still prefer to not engage with the chatbot on a site where I'm buying something or I'm giving my money. It is super rare because people generally won't invest enough to actually have the human language and understanding investment in place to make the chat experience feel like it's an intelligent, empathetic conversation that you could have with a human being. So I don't think we're there. So I think we've got to bring it back to just be more human about this stuff. Really think about, as a human being, how do I want to interact with chat and when is it most helpful? Don't just throw it up there because you can. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. I'm struck by something I was just reflecting on. There's a white paper that a good friend of the program, David Brunner, the CEO over at Module Q, shared with us last week. They take a very different approach to AI fundamentally because their perspective is we do AI without the generative AI, relying on someone to know what to ask for, how to ask for it, when to ask for it, introduces way too many variables in the system. And he shared a very academic white paper with me that was developed with Google and the University of Montreal, looking at that statistically. But there are some things that people need to know about without knowing that they need to know about it. And I think that generative AI, would be relying too much on someone every morning going to their chatbot and saying, tell me what corporate news I need to pay attention to today, right? They're just not going to do that. Ed, Michelle, thank you so much for spending time with the Polaris audience today. Ed, what's the best way for the audience to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, they can. My contact information is on our website, Akumina.com. You can always find me there, and you'll be able to find my email addresses there as well.
Fantastic. Michelle, how about for you?
Very similar to Ed. You can find me on Synozur.com's website, LinkedIn. I am third-time podcaster. You can find me on this podcast every couple of months.
Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next on Polaris Events, for a Pulse episode, we only have time to cover one event. So, on Tuesday, March 11th, following this podcast, Ed and Michelle will present a live webinar to show you how to transform the digital workplace with strategies for engagement and success. They'll share trends, case studies, and insights to drive employee effectiveness, and it's a great place to ask questions we haven't covered on Polaris. You can register and learn more at aka.synozur.com/DW2025. We'll have links to that in the show notes. You can learn more at synozur.com/events, and we'll add more events next time. And if you have an upcoming event you'd like us to promote on Polaris, please get in touch, and we'd be happy to include it. Well, that's a wrap for another episode of Polaris Pulse. I'd like to thank our guests, Ed Rogers from Akumina and Michelle Caldwell, for joining us and sharing their thoughts on AI and the future of digital workplaces. We encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at polaris.synozur.com. Send us your questions and feedback for the Synozur team. You can reach us via email at polaris@synozur.com. Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow the show wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris McNulty, and this has been Polaris, a show that charts the course for business and technology transformation from Synozur. Learn more at synozur.com. See you next time.